All right, why don't we get this going? You hear the deep frog in my voice? Do you hear the deep frog? That's what you call Southwest Airlines travel throat. It's the Astro Weather and Robert Phoenix. What's going on, everybody? Good morning. As I tend to my morning cup of super coffee. Really good. It hits the spot. So I apologize for being late, but man, it's a crazy trip back from California to Texas, and I didn't get into my bed until like 3:30 in the morning on Thursday. It was a nuts drive home from San Antonio. The lightning was so bright that at times it was like daylight. That's how intense it was. And we had, in certain points, just a major downpour of rain coming out of San Antonio. Anyway, I slept till about 10:30 yesterday in the morning, and then I woke up and I was on the verge of like getting sick, which is what happens sometimes when you run yourself down and you travel, especially with all those warm and cozy bodies on the Southwest Airlines flight that they pack in like sardines. There was not one available seat on the flight coming back from Vegas. And apparently there was some kind of like product show in Vegas, like general retailer consumer product show. And I guess it was over or ending, and everybody was going back home for their consumer goods, all the consumer goods that they found, all the great deals and steals. So that was my journey back. Anyway, welcome to Astro Weather. And as I work the frog out of my voice, let's see what's happening today. I hope everybody's having a fantastic morning. And if not, we'll see if we can help you out a little bit here. So we'll look at today's Astro Weather and what we have coming at us for the weekend. We are now deep into Pisces, second decan Pisces. That puts us in the Cancerian decan, and it would not be a Cancerian decan Pisces day. Second decan Pisces day, which is the Cancerian decan without the moon in Cancer. And there she is at 29 degrees, anaretic as the morning starts. How are you feeling about your money these days? That's the question I'd be asking, especially as we have anaretic Pluto at 29, anaretic moon at 29. It is a Friday. I would say look for financial news. Look for the financial news bomb to drop today. Look at housing prices and the trajectory of what's going on in the housing market. Very interesting day today, especially as the moon approaches Black Moon Lilith. And, how are people dealing with their finances? Not just in terms of the zeros and ones, the balance in your bank book or your checking account, but how do you feel, right? Because Leo is about your pride. It's about what you are investing in terms of the relationship to the things that you have and your quote unquote ego. Well, here comes the moon at 29 approaching Black Moon Lilith. This is a weekend, I think, where if you have money, you may have people ask you to borrow money, especially your children, right? So we're in an interesting territory with money this weekend, and use your discretion, because when we get this Moon Pluto opposition, there's a sense of desperation in the air, especially at 29 degrees. Somebody may come to you and say, "Look, I'm almost getting ready to get tossed out of my apartment," or my lease is hanging in the wind here, right? There's a real sense of desperation. So we have the micro and the macro. On the micro side, you're dealing with your own relationship to money and resources, and you're living space, right? That's part of it. People around you, your family, it's all connected. And then we have the macro, which is what's going on in the world in general. And again, I'd say look at the housing market today, look for announcements that may not necessarily be all that positive or rosy, right? We also have the in conjunct here with Saturn, also at 29 degrees. So we have a lot of anaretic energy in the air today. There's nothing left, but there's so much to do. And people are looking at, well, what do I have? How do I, because this may not impact you personally. This is a very collective expression here today at the start of the day. And it could impact people around you, family members, etc., as we've mentioned. But it will trickle back to you ultimately with this in conjunct with Saturn and looking at, is my money safe? This is a big question now. Is my money safe? What's going to happen with not just my money, but my material possessions? It's a very interesting day when it comes to these kinds of questions, and not an easy one, by the way. So we have Mercury finally breaking free on the other side of Saturn, and now it's in Pisces. So we still have the Mercury-Saturn conjunction, but it's a little bit different now. Mercury is more, imaginative. But so you have to be careful a bit here with Mercury, because the Piscean Mercury is very subjective. It's very imaginative. It likes to sort of get lost, right? Mercury in Pisces likes to get lost. And with Saturn here, there's almost an inconvenience with that energy. It's kind of like, fuck that, fuck it. I'm tired of watching my speech and being clear and making sure that other people understand what I'm saying and I understand what other people are saying, so that we have agreement. Today, Mercury breaks free and doesn't have a lot of interest in that. It's more along the lines of, well, how can I express myself? This is how Mercury is really. We do have it's still in conjunction with Saturn. Now, what's interesting here is that Mercury in Pisces can be very, very influential, because it can sway people's emotions and feelings. That's the nature of Mercury in Pisces. It can be even inspirational, given the right climate, right? So we still have this kind of inspirational and influential position of Mercury and the conjunction with Saturn. So yeah, there's a breaking free, but you could also influence people by simply breaking free. It's like, oh, look at that person. There's a term I was scolded for on here one day called leaving the reservation. Well, you can say leaving the reservation, leaving the plantation, leaving the big house or the prison or whatever. This is Mercury breaking away, and it has an influence on the rest of the inmates. Let's see, we have the sun, still in that square with Mars. And again, we're dealing with really subjective energy with Pisces. How you experience things is going to be different than how other people experience them. That's just the nature of Pisces. And so therein lies the conflict with Mars. And you may be on the same page with another person, but because the dualistic nature of Pisces, you may not be able to see that. And therefore, you enter into the conflict of things, and you're probably more connected than you're not. The challenge is do you want to make the effort to sort that out? That brings us back to Mercury and Saturn. And I would say the answer to that is probably no. Probably no. You're much more inclined to just be in your subjective world, which isn't always a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a terrible thing. Sometimes it's really good to be subjective, because there's a power in that subjectivity. You step away from the collective and you're able to, if you can navigate your own madness, if you can navigate your own delusions in some ways, it can be a very interesting journey, and you can come up with things that are a separate reality from the collective reality. And then when we have the Sun-Mars square, there's a kind of a dogged determination to plot that out. Now, with Sun-Mars squares, we also have to be a bit aware of the potential for what's the word I'm looking for? The hard outcome or the hard manifestation of the Sun-Mars square. I was following a story about a recruit. He's going to be in the not a recruit, a football player. He's going to be in the NFL draft. He's supposedly, I think, the top-rated defensive lineman. His name is Carter. He's from Georgia, and he got into a car crash. It was 2 days ago, and the people that were in the car with him, they died. He lived. Nothing really happened to him. He went back to the combine, which is the NFL's gathering of meat so that they can measure and prod and poke and test their future draftees. But that's a classic example of a Sun-Mars square. The guy was doing 110, 120 miles an hour in an area where he shouldn't have been doing it. Crashed his car and killed 2 people. I mean, this is how the Sun-Mars square can work here, especially in Gemini. So, as the sun begins to move into that tighter square with Mars, just, watch where you're driving and how you're driving. Watch how other people are driving as well. That's a big one. Absolutely. Now we have the Neptune Mars square, and it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It wasn't my fault that when I was going 125 miles per hour, that car moved out in front of me. You should have seen how fast I was going. Now, that's not what was said, but that's the inference of the Neptune Mars square. It's not my fault. Somebody else's fault. But then what happens is that ultimately that can boomerang right back and give you a sense of your own inability to understand and see things as they clearly are. This is a big political football with this Mars-Neptune square and kicking things around. And people saying, not my fault, didn't happen to me. So this is going to be really interesting. Again, on a Friday. Friday's where they have the news drops. And I would look to January 6th and what happened or didn't happen during January 6th, and look for January 6th news to come out today. And again, scrambling to the Hamptons or scrambling to the Adirondacks or wherever these people go and they want to crawl back into their holes from whence they came. That's a part of the Mars-Neptune square here. Not my fault. Oh, I didn't do it. Nope, not me, not our party. It's slippery. Mars in Gemini square Neptune is slippery. It's hard to find accountability here. And so we have these Mars squares to the Sun and Neptune, both in Pisces. This is not the season of today. At the very least, it's not the season of honesty and character. Now, let's pair up all the Aries. Aries doesn't give a shit about that. Aries doesn't care. Aries is like, yeah. You're incongruent. Yeah. We know you're lying. Yep. We know you're dropping disinfo or misinfo. But here we go. This is the masses. This is the masses. This is the horde. And I believe it's on, if I'm not mistaken, July 25th. Now, Venus will be long gone by then, and Jupiter's already in Taurus, but that true node begins its ingress into Aries. And it's a big ingress. And the true node transition through Aries is going to be huge. It's going to be major. We're going to have eclipses. We're going to have the rise of the individual. And we're going to be over here with that South Node in Libra, and people are on the hunt for justice. Balancing the scales. It's going to be a very interesting time. Buckle your seats, boys and girls. That true node in Aries is going to be electric, to say the least. So here we have these are the, I won't call them storm clouds, but this is the energy that's gathering right now. Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Well, it's a good day to fall in love, but it doesn't always last with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Aries. So we also have a Venus-Chiron conjunction, which if you are in a relationship and you have a Venus-Chiron conjunction in the air, you're looking at the nature of the relationship, what it means, and how in some ways you can strengthen it if you want to go down that path. You want to go down that path, and you can reinvest in love even with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Very interesting day with all of these luminaries lined up here. And we start with Vesta being the oldest of the asteroids, and we end in Aries with Juno, which is the youngest of the asteroids. So there's a kind of a reverse aging process going on here today. Very interesting. It's an infusion of youth and vitality, and a harbinger of an early spring for sure. And here, I think we're going to be in the 80s again today in the hill country. And I'm looking at my lawn and it's turning green. I love it. All right. So here's your astro weather for the day. For the weekend, we have the moon moving into Leo over the weekend. And, Leo moons they can be very fun, but there's also a lot of attachment to ego with the Leo moon. But with all this Aries in the air, I get a sense that everybody's ego will be satisfied. Everybody gets a slice of the pie. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets to feel like they're very important and not any more important than anyone else, at least on paper. So go out this weekend, celebrate, have a good time, and sometimes celebration is the most potent form of dissent. Think about that for a moment. Celebration is the most potent form of dissent. So if you can celebrate consciously, it's a blow against the system. That's my little piece on that. All right, let's talk about the star of the day. Very interesting character. Very interesting character. Today's star of the day is none other than Charles Ponzi. Oh, yes, the creator of the Ponzi scheme. And there's his quote, "I went looking for trouble and I found it." So what makes Charles Ponzi tick? Well, first of all, he's a Scorpio rising. Keep that in mind. He's a second decan. Scorpio rising puts him in the Piscean decan, a little more slippery than being in the Scorpio decan or even the Cancerian decan. So he's a slippery fellow, and he likes to play with other people's money. And we see over here, I don't think I've ever seen more Taurus together, and particularly in the seventh house in any other chart. We got Pluto, we got the part of fortune, we got Jupiter, we got Chiron, we got Neptune, we got Saturn. So he's doing interactions and transactions with people one-to-one. So Ponzi was basically the founder of what we call the Ponzi scheme. And it was essentially taking money from people and promising them an absurd return on their money, right? I think after 1 year, it was a 50% return. After 2 years, it was 100% return. And so he was essentially taking money. It was a fairly complex mail fraud scheme where he was using these mail vouchers from other countries that were worth more in the other countries than they were in the States, and he was buying them and cashing them, and he figured out a system, but his system didn't account for a 50% rise in the rate of return, right? So what he would do is he would take money in, and then the new investors, he would pay the old investors off. But he had to continually grow the scheme, or else he'd be out of business. This is what Bernie Madoff did. Bernie Madoff just took a page out of Charles Ponzi. And look at all that Taurus. I mean, he's going to be heavily invested in money. Holy shit. Right? Heavily invested. And then with Neptune here, Neptune's kind of embedded. He can get people's trust quite easily. Saturn Neptune gives him a sense of authority, right? Like he knows what he's doing, but he also has that kind of beneficent quality of Neptune. And with Jupiter, there's a promise. There's a promise of reward, big promise of reward. But we all know, and even with Pluto here, he's dealing with again, other people's money, and it's just nuts how much Taurus he has. And with Uranus, the Uranus component works here as well, because with the male stuff, he's dealing with things like communication. At that time, mail was a big, sort of artery for communication, and it's happening very quickly. Everything's happening very, very quickly. Uranus is like the turbo that is fueling these transactions that people are experiencing. And he has Mars in Cancer at 1 degree. And again, you're dealing with things like security and people's investments. And he's got that Mars in the 8th house, and he's really like funneling that Mars. He's really, tunneled in on it. And 8th house being other people's money, right? And with Mercury in Aquarius, he's got this really interesting late Mercury trine to Mars. And his Mercury's retrograde, so eventually the shit's going to catch up to him. And he has some water in his chart, but that's not what's driving Charles Ponzi. What's driving Charles Ponzi is money, resources, and making it very quickly. I don't know what his exit strategy was. Sun-Venus conjunction, again, interesting. Normally Mercury is somewhere around here, right? But now Mercury had retrograded and it's all the way back here. So he's got the Sun-Venus conjunction, which means he's very charming. He's very, very charming. He has that way, that Piscean way of putting people at ease. So it makes it a lot easier for him to convince people to spend all this money on this really remarkable, incredible scheme, which is really the first version of Bernie Madoff. The squares that are going on here are with the moon. He's got one moon square with Pluto. So at some point, he was so pot committed that he just couldn't get out. Now, he eventually goes to prison. And when he gets out of prison, the state of Massachusetts hit him with more charges, and he went back to prison again. So the guy spent upwards of 10 years in a Fed and a state prison. He gets out eventually. His wife divorces him. He gets sent back to Italy, but somehow he winds up in Brazil, and he dies in a charity hospital in Brazil, basically penniless and alone. So, boys and girls, crime does not pay, unless, of course, you're connected to much more powerful people than yourself. Now, he missed his life lesson. Honestly, his life lesson is the true note in Sagittarius, and you have to be very, very honest with the true note in Sagittarius. You have to be scrupulously honest. And so, what does he do? He gets into that South Node in Gemini, which is the con man in South Node in Gemini, in ingress into the 8th house. So he flunked his life lesson. And Charles Ponzi lived a more honest lifestyle. He might have been able to do great things, actually. He might have been able to do great things. But alas, he didn't. And he wanted to go the easy route, the South Node Gemini ingress into the 8th house route. And I guess he didn't cross the palms enough of the most important people of the day so that he could stay out of incarceration. But there you go. Here's your star of the day, Mr. Charles Ponzi, also known as Carlo Ponzi, since he was born in Italy, in Lugo, in 1882. He found an opportunity and he mined it all the way into the federal pen. So there you go, Charles Ponzi. All right, I'll be back here on this channel at noon with the Cribbies, and we'll be talking about some very interesting, fascinating, deep subjects with two of my favorite people on the internet and in life. So please join me here at 12 noon with the Friday Firecast. Until then, have yourself a wonderful weekend, and just pay attention on the roads. That's what I would say. That's what I'm going to leave this with.